I don't think any of us will ever forget the ghastly tragedy of Grenfell Tower, in which so many people lost their lives when fire took hold in the cladding on the outside of the block put there to insulate it. If anything good can possibly come out of such a terrible event, it must clearly be the determination to ensure that nothing similar ever happens again. So now it seems incredible that dozens of you have been in touch to tell us that you're still living in buildings where the very fabric of your home is putting you and your family's lives at risk.
We were being told that this cladding is so combustible that it will spread from the bottom to the top in 7 minutes flat. If there is a fire, the fire will spread up so quickly. Then you start thinking about what if something happens in the middle of the night.
Ritu Saha lives in this block of flats in South London. Ever since the devastating Grenfell Tower fire in 2017, she has been living in fear of what would happen if something similar happened where she lives. That's because her building is covered in a very similar cladding to Grenfell Tower, the cladding that was subsequently blamed for exacerbating the blaze. The only way to make Ritu's building safe is to remove all the cladding and replace it. But that could cost millions, a bill which has to be met by Ritu and the 56 other flat owners.
Basically, I felt completely abandoned. You are living in a completely unsafe property and you have to pretty much go bankrupt trying to make it safe on your own, even though you had nothing to do with the problem in the first place.
It's an issue we've looked at before on Rip Off Britain.
To have to pay to make the building safe isn't fair at all.
Well, since that was first aired, there's been some good news. The government announced a £200 million fund to cover the cost of replacing the cladding on private buildings. Trouble is, because the type of cladding Ritu has on her building is slightly different, the government fund won't stretch to pay to replace all of it. And while fire safety reports say it should be removed immediately, the bill for doing so falls to the residents as leaseholders of the property. It's a huge concern for Ritu and other flat owners.
When we first found out that the cladding was a problem, I don't really think I really grasped the scale of the problem.
To keep residents safe, they were told they'd have to employ fire wardens to monitor their building, but that would mean a significant rise in their service charge. So, to save money, Ritu and other residents volunteered to take on one of the roles instead. It's meant taking shifts to patrol the corridors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The building now has a specialised fire alarm in place, meaning only one warden is now needed. But the only measure that will really make the building a safe place to live is to remove the cladding entirely.
We have a fire exit on this floor. If there was a fire, that fire exit on both walls is covered with combustible cladding. So if there was a fire, I would actually have to run towards an exit with 2 flaming walls on either side of me. That's the last thing anybody should be having to think about, but we have to think about that every single day.
While Ritu thinks it's only right that anyone with the same type of cladding as Grenfell is helped with the cost of their remedial works, she can't understand why, given that her building has also been deemed unsafe, she isn't being given the same financial assistance.
It is a complete feeling of betrayal and abandonment, and it's just, also helplessness, because you really don't know what to do. You do not have the tools to solve the problem yourself, and nobody is helping you.
The government has urged that the cost of removing cladding isn't passed on to leaseholders like Ritu, but some freeholders and landlords have argued that it isn't their responsibility either, and legally they're correct. Most leases stipulate that the leaseholder is responsible for such works, but if the government is prepared to help private homeowners who have one type of unsafe cladding, many argue it should support residents in all developments classed as unsafe. And that's certainly the position of the freeholder of Ritu's building, a company called Citystead. It told us that while it sympathised with the leaseholder's position, it hadn't been involved in the installation of the cladding, which it pointed out at the time of construction was certified to have met building regulations. It said responsibility for managing repairs lies with the leaseholder's own management company. but added that it's speaking to leaseholders, the council and the government in order to find a viable solution for the removal and replacement of unsafe cladding. Well, across the country, there are likely to be thousands of people living in buildings whose cladding has been deemed high risk, including here in Manchester. Tasha Fuchs and her boyfriend were also recently presented with a sky-high estimate to replace the cladding on their development.
It's a death trap, and we've been told it's more flammable than Grenfell.
Their cladding is actually made of wood, which again means it isn't covered by the government fund.
As you can see, this building is timber, so that doesn't include us at all, so we still have to pay for everything.
At your own expense?
At our own expense. When the letter came through, £44,000. You know, couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe these figures, and that I would have to pay after having, you know, bought the flat, having put every penny I owned, you know, to buy this flat.
On another floor, I caught up with homeowners Emma and Rob. They're also facing a bill of up to £44,000. How did you feel when you found out how much you were going to have to pay to put it safe?
Eye-watering. It was eye-watering. I mean, certainly for me and my partner have been kind of working towards saving to move out and start a family, and all that has been put on hold. I mean, we couldn't really move even if we wanted to because the flats are in effect unmortgageable.
So would it be fair to say that right now you feel trapped?
Yeah.
I'd say more than trapped. I'd kind of say held hostage in a building that actually we have no control over how this was built. And now we're being held, I suppose, to hostage or to ransom to then have to fix the external of something which
Had nothing to do with
had
us.
nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Many residents here and in other similarly affected developments have come together to form an action group. They're hoping to put pressure on the building's developer to come up with a solution. You bought this place after the Grenfell fire.
That's right.
Did that weigh on you at the time when you were buying it? Did you make any inquiries as to what the fire precautions were and things?
No, we didn't. Why would flats be sold that are unsafe? You just couldn't think about that.
So your argument would be you bought this flat in good faith.
Exactly.
Because it had apparently passed all the relevant tests,
Yeah.
that it was a safe place to live, and have now discovered that it's far from safe.
Exactly.
We spoke to E&J Estates, the building's freeholder, and it too said that while it had enormous sympathy for the tenants, as the freeholder, it's not its responsibility to pay for these types of works. It pointed out that it has no control over the building, and nor has it requested funds from leaseholders in respect of any works. It said responsibility ultimately rests with the building's management company, which is owned and controlled by the leaseholders themselves. Whoever ends up footing the bill, it does seem unfair that the government will help with repair costs for some types of cladding, but not for others. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, however, sees things differently. It told us it's an absolute priority to ensure that residents are safe in their homes, but the building owners are responsible for safety, and they should explore all options to avoid costs being passed on to residents. It said the government fund to replace the same type of cladding that was on Grenfell Tower was wholly exceptional and was based on the unparalleled fire risk that particular type of cladding poses. So if you're considering buying a flat with external cladding, it's certainly worth finding out the type of material that's been used and whether it complies with current building regulations. In the meantime, Tasha is adamant that it's not going to be her or any of her fellow residents who should be made to pay for fixing a problem that wasn't their fault.
I want to be happy and safe in my home. I don't want to be worried and stressed all the time.